Have you ever wondered what the difference between a sabbatical and a vacation was? I know I didn't know the difference until I spoke to Lyndall Farley. Welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Break. Lyndall Farley, a sabbatical coach and well-being specialist, joins me today to talk about the importance of taking extended time off in the form of a sabbatical in order to be more productive and efficient at work. Hi, I'm Dr. Nafisa Sikandri, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety-based disorders. I created the Mental Health Break podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you prioritize your mental health. Mental illness can cost you time and money. Ignoring your symptoms will only make the problems worse. Taking time out of your busy day to dedicate to improving your mental health can lead to long-term health and wellness. In this podcast, each week you'll learn tips, tricks, and proven strategies to help you regain control of your life, all while prioritizing your mental health. If you want to improve your life, regain control of your mental health, and feel empowered, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transforming Anxiety course, an online, self-paced anxiety course to help you manage and control your anxiety from the comfort, privacy, and convenience of your own home. Learn how to transform your anxiety in just 6 short weeks. Course registration is now open. To learn more, visit transforminganxiety.com/course. I'm so excited to talk to Lyndall Farley about the importance of sabbaticals and taking time off. Let me introduce her briefly before I bring her on. Lyndall Farley is a sabbatical coach and well-being specialist, helping people and companies thrive using the power of time off to boost well-being. Lyndall has taken 10 sabbaticals and now helps people navigate the logistical and emotional process of taking a break from work themselves. Lyndall left her decade-long corporate career to train as a co-active coach and founded Beyond the Break in 2019. She believes that we can all live our best lives by getting more out of our breaks from work. Whether it's a short break or a transformational sabbatical, it's a chance to pause, reflect, recharge, and then return to build your ideal life. Over her career, Lyndall has worked with large multinational organizations such as KPMG, Shell, and Philips, as well as SMEs and individuals. Lyndall is Australian and has traveled to over 60 countries on all 7 continents. She's lived in the US and London and now lives in Amsterdam, married to a Dutch American. Well, hi, Lyndall. Thank you for joining me today for this podcast interview. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. It's a pleasure.
So I shared a little bit earlier about your background and your specialty in sabbaticals. So can you tell us what led to the specialization in sabbaticals?
Yeah, look, I mean, my story and kind of leading into why I am so passionate about sabbaticals and I work in this space is really fueled from my own journey. From a very young age, young in adult years, I've started taking these long breaks from work just to kind of stay mentally healthy, just to be able to explore my passions, but also to recharge from, the studies I was doing, from the work I was doing. And over time, I realized that I was sort of falling into a pattern. I would work really hard or study really hard, achieve, the goals, and then need to kind of take a step back and reassess and really figure out what was next for me. And so to date, I've actually taken 10 sabbaticals and I'm planning my 11th now. It's really become more of a way of life for me. But essentially, I sort of fell into it, if you like, because it wasn't until about sabbatical number 7 that I realized that there was a term for what I was doing, which was a sabbatical, being an extended break from work to really step back, recharge, and figure out what's next. So yeah, I fell into it by accident, and now here we are.
I love the idea of sabbaticals, but I've only heard of college professors taking sabbaticals. So how can the rest of us take advantage of sabbaticals? And for some people, they might not have the luxury of doing so. So how can they fit in some kind of a version of it in their own lives?
So I often talk about intentionality and mindset when you're thinking about a sabbatical. And there's a lot of kind of misconceptions, I guess, about what a sabbatical is and who can take one. So first of all being, this is just for college professors. Not true. There's 17% of corporate America is now, companies have sabbatical programs, and that number is growing, which is fantastic. So it's coming over into the corporate world, but it's also, it's coming into the world for anyone who sort of needs to take an intentional break. And I guess there is a real difference between a vacation and a sabbatical. You know, the major one is kind of the length of time. A sabbatical is generally sort of an extended break from work. So whatever your normal kind of vacation allowance would be, because that changes all around the world, sort of double that, and that's kind of your starting point for the length of a sabbatical. So it really is a chance to step back, to really recharge from a well-being perspective. So physically recharge, mentally recharge, emotionally recharge. Sometimes it involves healing, depending if there's, trauma that's happened, or things that need to be resolved. And I think it's really about working out, okay, where am I at in life and where do I want to be, whilst really looking after your well-being in the process. And so that's all that a sabbatical is. And, these kind of definitions that people get hung up on need not apply. You can design your own sabbatical and design your own well-being recharge however you need it to be for your life.
So there isn't a set amount of time. We could do it in weekends, but maybe because you're Australian and you have a European mindset where you guys can actually take vacations and really unplug and recharge. That doesn't seem to be an American way of life, right? I mean, even on vacation, they're working, they take their computers with them. So what are some tips you can give us on how to make the most of a vacation? We might only have a week, but how can we make the most of that to make it kind of like a mini sabbatical?
Yeah, so I have what I call the recharge model. And it's really, you need to sort of do 4 things in order to really make the most of any break. And so that is vacation, but it also applies to longer extended breaks like sabbaticals, right? So the first one is relax. Right. I mean, it seems ridiculous to say that on your break you need to relax, but it's so surprising to me how people get confused about what is relaxing for them. And that's the real key. You need to do something that is relaxing for you. So I often hear people talk about like, I really just need to relax. I'm going to go off and do a silent meditation retreat in Tibet. And you're like, okay, well, is that something that you enjoy doing? Well, no, I think it's going to be hell, but I think it'd be good for me. And so that's not going to be, a relaxing break for someone, right? And so if that's your jam, then great, go do that. But, be true to yourself in terms of what is actually really relaxing, right? And so the second thing is you've got to detach from work. This is critically important. And this is like, if we want to stereotype, this is where Americans do tend to struggle a little bit more, is to really turn off the computer and, step away from the phone, really unplug. And that is the single most detrimental thing to someone's kind of recharge on a holiday or a sabbatical, is staying connected, So you've got to relax, you've got to really disconnect. And then you've got to make sure that you've got control over your schedule. This is another thing that people get wrong, is not actually having control over what you want to do. So if somebody else is running your agenda for the time that you are off, and we see this a lot when families are involved. So let's say the Thanksgiving, Christmas break, very rarely do you hear stories of how relaxing that was, because families are involved and, all of the things that come entwined with that. And so, those are the things you really need to make sure that you're doing. Relax, decompress and really make sure that you've got control over your time.
For people that are so used to being adrenaline junkies, right? Just go, go, go. They don't just stopping and slowing down can be very boring. And we pack so much into our vacation that we need a vacation from the vacation.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, just relax. But when you, like you just had a baby and there are people that have family, like you said, they have kids and they go on vacation. And I know when my daughter was young, vacations were not relaxing. You're constantly worried about entertaining and making sure that they're having fun and making sure everybody else in your party is having fun. It just doesn't become relaxing, I guess. So how can family members and people with multiple kids do this? Or should they take separate vacations? How do you feel about couples at least, taking separate vacations?
Yeah. I mean, it really comes down to design, right? So design what you need for you, being really honest with yourself, but also being sure that you are prioritizing your own self-care, right? Because if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after your family. You can't look after your children. Your relationship will suffer. First and foremost, you have to look after yourself, right? That's the primary thing that you need to promise yourself, is that you'll look after yourself. And so be honest with yourself about, okay, what is it that I need from a break? Where am I at? In terms of my energy levels, and what is it that I need from a break? Do I need to go away and do a health retreat on my own? And don't be afraid to ask for that time and ask for the support that you need from your family or whoever it might be to get that time. But if it is that you want to experience a family holiday, there's lots of joy around that as well. Make sure that you're baking into the design of that holiday opportunities for you to go and recharge, opportunities for your partner to recharge, and then opportunities to have, together time. I think there's a mistake that people make, that they think if we just go on holiday, we will be relaxed. And as you just said, not always the case. So it comes down to really being very intentional about how you design that time and baking in enough time for yourself and enough time for what you need for your own recharge.
Yeah, it's really important, especially like you said, giving each other a break and allowing the other to go off and recharge, because you're no good to each other or your family if you're not recharged and you're operating from an empty cup.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So you also teach organizations how to create sabbaticals. Is that mostly a European thing, or do you think American companies are encouraging that as well? Not like the big corporations, but little companies that, might not be able to afford to lose their employees for a couple of weeks at a time.
Yeah, so what I'm helping organizations do is set up a sabbatical program, but set it up in a way that works for employees, but where it also works for the business, right? And I think there's a balance, there's a symbiotic kind of relationship that needs to occur between employer and employee, so that, employees can get the recharge that they need. And that's from the perspective of all leave, right? All leave available to them, vacation, carers leave, through to, longer, deeper kind of recharge leave like a sabbatical. But basically I'm helping companies to design the policy, right? So what they're allowing their employees to do, so that they can make sure that they've got business continuity, but so that they can keep their best employees. Because ultimately, things like sabbatical programs in companies become a burnout prevention. They become part of, a well-being program, and that's where they should be positioned, and that's where they should sit. And so when companies will really want to get serious about this stuff and they really want to invest in it, then what people need is time. They need time, and they need the ability to properly, deeply recharge. And that's not every year. One company that I'm working with, which is based out of Boston, they're doing it once every 7 years. You can take a break. A longer, a 2-month sabbatical is what they're offering. And so it really comes down to the company. It comes down to what the policy and how you want to set that up. But it also comes down to the positioning, right? So positioning this as, this is important for your well-being, and we want to support this with a company-wide policy that allows you to actually get the recharge you need.
So what are the financial benefits to a company? Are they paying these people to take 2 months off, and maybe that's cheaper than hiring a new hire? So what are some financial benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the economics of losing one of your best, highly talented people, right? Having to pay recruitment agents to rehire someone, and then having that time of, loss of productivity while that person is being trained up in the role, not to mention the risk of having that person not actually be a good fit and then having to start all over again, right? I mean, people have looked at this, and it costs a company on average 3 or 4 months' salary just to turn, your average kind of employee around from a recruitment perspective, like once you factor in all the training and loss of productivity, etc. And so it doesn't take too much to, say, offer your employees every 5 years, every 7 years, what is the benefit of keeping your talent, and allowing them to go off. A lot of the time, or most sabbatical policies actually are unpaid anyway, right? And some of them are partially paid, right? So even just the ability to go off and to have a break, even if it is unpaid, is still a huge advantage for a lot of people and will allow them to stay. So, I mean, there's so many people that I talk to that basically say, look, I want to stay with my company. I like my job, everything, but I've just been working so hard for 10 years, 15 years. I just need a break, and that's reasonable, after you've been in your career for a while. And so for companies that are in the forefront of this thinking have realized this, and they're like, yeah, okay, great. We want to keep you, go off, recharge, get your health back, and then come back and be ready for the next burst of energy to go forward. So yeah, it doesn't take too much to justify it, but it does kind of need a change in mindset from the company.
Now, these jobs are protected. So if they do have a sabbatical program, it can be guaranteed that even if they're not getting paid to go off for 2 months, that they can come back to their job at the same salary, the same. So are there, policies in place to make sure that nothing changes for the employee that wants to take that sabbatical? Because I can imagine somebody that might be lower ranking being afraid of actually taking that sabbatical for fear of punishment down the road. Have you seen that happen at all?
That's one of the fears that I hear the most is there's going to be a detrimental effect to my career if I take this break. But the fear, in my experience, the fear dramatically outweighs the reality of that actually occurring. And most of the time that is not the case. The only time where that can be the case is if the sabbatical has not been planned very well, or if somebody has just sort of gone in and kind of demanded the sabbatical and gone within a short period of time, right? So if you position why you need the sabbatical and you position your commitment to the company and your wish to go and look after your mental health and your well-being, and that's why you want to do it, and then you want to come back so that you can give the best to the company. If you're positioning it like that and you're reasonable in giving enough notice, right, so that the company can plan it and that you're not leaving any team or boss behind the eight ball because because you've sort of rushed off on sabbatical. So basically, to make sure that it's not a detrimental effect to your career, it becomes about how do you position it as a win-win for the company, and how do you make sure that you support the company with adequate planning to make sure that there's no fallout from the time that you're away.
I know a lot of people are very burnt out. It's interesting, the timing of this interview with you, because recently in the news, there was a man that kidnapped himself and or staged his own kidnapping and kind of left himself in the desert pretending that he was kidnapped and he couldn't go to work for that reason. So I would hate for people to get to that level that they have to resort to extreme methods like that.
Wow. Yeah.
Even went as far as tying his own hands with his belt behind his back. So.
Yeah, it's not that desperate, people. We don't need to go to those lengths, just ask. Don't let it get that bad. Ask for what you need. And it's so surprising. I think a lot of the time people have a hell of a lot of fear around asking for what they need when it comes to mental health, well-being, anything like that. And if you present something like, a sabbatical in a positive light, and you are positioning it well, and you're doing it in a responsible way, a lot of the time bosses and reasonable people will say yes to that. I obviously hear a lot of the time of, or not a lot of the time, some of the time, people really have to fight for getting the time that they need. But increasingly now, particularly with COVID, particularly with the focus on health, particularly with everybody having just been so cooped up, I think there's a much greater focus on well-being, a much greater focus on being mentally, physically, and emotionally healthy. And so these things are seen as a mechanism to help you do that. And so reasonable companies are starting to really turn their minds around and say yes to these things.
Unfortunately, the patients that I work with, they can't even get the time to come to therapy. They might have a loved one that has passed and they're not able to get extended time to grieve. So I think there are some companies that are maybe reasonable and forward thinking, and they're looking at the bigger picture and how they can save so much money by retaining the employees that they have and preventing burnout. And like you said, with COVID and being cooped up, mental illness is definitely going to go on the rise in the coming months. And so it'll be in the advantage of the company to offer this to their employees. But from the people that I work with, a lot of them are so overwhelmed and so burnt out. They're at home, they're raising their kids, they're homeschooling, they're working from home and trying to juggle all of that. And there's no vacation to look forward to. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation, and that how can we create sabbaticals that are not even necessarily formally from work, because some companies might punish you for wanting to take time off. I think it's a luxury that some people can do that. But how can they, within the limits and the confines of what they have, create that sense of recharging and regenerating themselves so that they aren't burnt out, that they're not what are some things that you've done during your sabbaticals that you think would be beneficial for everyday people that might not have the luxury of an extended time away?
Yeah. So I think it really becomes all about mindset. Trying to carve out time to recharge is the challenge in itself, right? It requires prioritization. Prioritizing your recharge time and prioritizing time off is something that's very difficult, particularly as we've been, in lockdown. There's certainly a lot of situations that have been very difficult over the last year. And, sabbaticals are a privilege. We have to acknowledge that a sabbatical is a privilege, but it is more accessible than people think. And so what I would encourage people to do when you think about, I could never take a sabbatical, right? Really start to think about, okay, what are the assumptions that I'm making? and really start to challenge those assumptions and really start to, see if you can kind of break those down and challenge your own thinking as to whether you could, take an extended piece of time off. Like, I don't have enough money. Okay, well, how could I get enough money to support this? What are the clever ways I could finance this, So that's from a sabbatical perspective. But then when we're just talking about normal recharge time, it is about the mindset, right? So making sure that you're carving out and prioritizing the time, but also that you're not just having time off, but like being time off away from work, but that you are actually actively doing things that will help you recharge during that time. So we talked about, doing relaxing activities, making sure you have control over your schedule, really properly disconnecting from work, right? So one of the worst things that we've seen over the last year is this blurring of work and life, right? And so it just feels like we work from home. And so, work and life just become completely blurred and intertwined, and there's no off button. There's no recharge button, right? It's like, the phone battery is just on empty, right? And so we've got to make sure that in the time that we do have off, we use it effectively to recharge, right? And so there's a very big difference between just not working and having time off to recharge. And so, again, that is very personal. What you do in that time to recharge, it might be going fishing or going for a walk with the dog, but really making sure that you think intentionally about, okay, so what is it that I do that makes me feel recharged? So what activities can I do that when I finish that activity, I feel like I have more energy than when I started, right? Sometimes I get people to write down an energy log, right? Log all the activities that you do in a day and log the ones that take energy from you and log the ones that, recharge you or give you energy back. And then look at that log and intentionally just plan more of the activities into your time off that really give you energy, and try and reduce the ones that take energy from you. It's energy in, energy out. And just look at that from the perspective of being mindful about how you plan your time and your time off.
And it doesn't have to cost anything. You can literally just lay down or sleep more, take more baths, just self-care basically, right? At the basic level.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, let's take the example. Take a bath is a fantastic example, right? So you could just, go in, run a bath, plonk in, sit down for 5 minutes and get out and then go, yeah, I don't really feel that more recharged, right? Or you can intentionally, mindfully make a ritual out of it, get some candles, spray the room with scent, put bubbles in, close the doors, put on some music, satisfy all of your senses, really make it a beautiful, meditative, restorative experience, right? And all of that is in your control, and all of that is in your power, right? You can either just plonk in the bath for 5 minutes and go, well, there, I had a bath and it didn't recharge me, or you can really mindfully think about how can I get the most recharge out of this experience,
Oh yeah, that just everything you just said, I was beginning to imagine my own experience with bath time and how much I love just like the candles, the scents, the putting in the water. I like essential oils, and so just putting in some calming oils in the bath and just completely shutting off for 15 minutes. Even guided meditations, there's so many free ones on YouTube that people can just every 15 minutes, every day for 10 to 15 minutes, just letting go and relaxing, because like I said, a lot of people don't know how to disconnect. They don't know how to recharge, and they get bored even for 15 minutes just laying there because they're so used to going.
It's really interesting though. This word boredom kind of pops up a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's really, the concept of boredom is very interesting, because actually we need to be in a state of non-work, right? We need to, in order to recharge, right? And getting into a state of boredom is actually a really good thing for your brain. It's actually fantastic from a neuroscience perspective. It actually is the point at which you start making new neural pathway connections. And that's the genesis of creativity, of inspiration, of new ideas, right? And so getting a little bit bored is great. Like, do that. Like have the aim of your recharge time be that, oh, I feel a little bit bored now. Like, yes, goal achieved, you know?
I tell my daughter all the time that only boring people get bored and that kids shouldn't be bored. We're so busy filling their time with so much to do that we don't allow them to be bored. And like you said, during that boredom, we become our internal imagination gets activated and we start thinking, and maybe creative ideas might come, innovations might come.
Really?
We don't allow ourselves that time.
I know. It's like this society is kind of decided that boredom is bad. And so we've got devices, we've got entertainment, we've got media, we've got news, we've got all of these things to keep us switched on, right? But you wind back 50 years, you know, we didn't have all of those things. And people were much better at just sitting and looking out the window, you know? And that is actually like a very mindful kind of practice in itself. And so, yeah, do things that allow you to get a little bit bored. That's good for you.
Yeah, let's normalize boredom and make it a thing again.
Yeah, let's get bored.
Let's get bored. That's right. Hashtag get bored.
Yeah, exactly.
So knowing everything you know about sabbaticals and the importance of rest and self-care, what would you tell your younger self about all that?
It really segues nicely, because what I would tell my younger self was all of these sabbaticals that I took earlier on, I really wasn't maximizing them from the perspective of figuring out what was going on with me, figuring out what I needed to do next, you know, really learning more about myself. I was really like traveling around the world and ticking boxes. You know, I love travel. I still love travel, but now I love slow travel. What I would tell my younger self is slow down. Use this time to slow down and not just rush around. Actually give yourself time to get bored, and that's when the really juicy stuff will come up for you, and that's when you'll actually start solving some of the problems that you need to solve in your life. So yeah, I tell myself to get bored.
Get bored and the magic will happen, right?
Yeah, basically.
That's such a good point. And when I travel, I want to make the most of it also, because you don't know when you're going to go back to that same place. But at the same time, like I said, you come back and you're exhausted. And I like the idea of a slow travel and I have a patient who's been teaching me this. He just goes and just sits on a ledge and stares out into the space and really appreciates that time. And I was like, wow, I want to be able to do that one day, just to sit and really soak in the amazing place that I'm in and be more mindful about it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that when you allow yourself to travel slowly is that you get much more immersed in the experience of the environment and the culture around you, whether that's another state in the US, you know, and just noticing the differences state to state, because I mean, the US is so incredibly diverse just in the one country. Or if that's, you know, a different country and a completely different culture, you know, slowly traveling gives you those chances to meet the locals. And I think the other thing that when you've got, you know, this packed travel agenda, there's no time for serendipity. And that's one of the things that I love to optimize the most when I'm traveling is just, you know, opportunity for the amazing serendipitous moments to occur, you know, where you sit down next to somebody, strike up a conversation, and they end up having this fantastic local restaurant and they invite you round and then they teach you how to cook a fantastic local dish. I'm just making this stuff up. But it's those experiences, right? It's those real experiences. It's not when you go off and see all of the touristic locations and you start ticking that I've seen the Eiffel Tower and I've seen the Tower of London, I've seen all of these things. They're not the things you remember. You remember that fantastic time that you met this local who showed you the, what life is really like, So optimize for serendipity. That's what I would also tell my younger self.
That reminds me of when I was sent to Egypt by my program and I was waiting for a professor to meet me. So I went there a couple of days before, and it was my first time outside this country. And I was so in awe of everything. I mean, I was randomly getting in cars with this guy. He's like, I'll take you to the pyramids. And so dangerous right now when I'm thinking of it. But at that time, I just got in, and he did. He took me to the pyramids, and he took me to all these stores and showed me all the different products that his friends are selling. Thank God that was a safe opportunity. But what I remember more than that is just taking a walk and meeting the locals who thought I was Egyptian, offering me Coke. I didn't speak their language. They didn't speak my language. Yeah. And what a touching story. I mean, moment that was. I still remember that so many years later.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of my best stories and best learnings from my travel have all been those kinds of serendipity kind of moments, where you just find yourself in a situation. And sometimes it does take a little bit of trust, trusting a stranger. It's hard these days to do that. And I think about in my 20s, some of the things in terms of the trust, like a little bit like your story, some of the things that I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, let's go do it. And then you look back and you're like, whoa.
What was I doing? And it was my 20s. So yeah, I was that naive and innocent, and I didn't have the fear and the cynicism. And so that's the opportunity.
Yeah. But they're the moments that, that turn into, these fantastic memories that you'll never forget. So.
Right. Well, thank you so much. This was such a good conversation. And I think we do need to keep talking about just taking a break and pausing and slowing down, even if it's during the weekend, and making the most of those 2 days instead of continuing to fill it up. Right.
Yeah. Get off your phone. Put the phone down.
Off that phone, yeah. Where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So the best place to find me is LinkedIn. I publish content there, and so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I always love to build my network there. So Lyndall Farley, you can just look me up there. The other place is you can look up a little bit more about what I do from a coaching perspective, and also my sabbatical program on my website, so beyondabreak.com. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, Beyond a Break, as well.
I'll be sure to link all that on your page so people can connect with you. But thank you so much. This was such a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that we're talking about it. It's something that we need to encourage, I guess, particularly at this moment.
Well, it was also a really good reminder for me to do more of that myself. Like some people I know feel guilty even calling in sick. I say instead of calling in sick, just call in a mental health day, and just really enjoy that day and take advantage of it. So it was a good reminder for me as well.
Good. Excellent. Glad to hear it.
Thank you so much again.
My pleasure.
After listening to Lyndall talk about the importance of sabbaticals, I'm inspired to take one myself. To learn more about Lyndall, visit transforminganxiety.com/20. When you're there, go ahead and leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts about this episode. If you haven't already, you can show support for the Mental Health Break podcast by subscribing wherever you're tuning in from today. We have some great interviews lined up, and you don't want to miss a single episode. Subscribe today so you get notified when new episodes drop. I can't wait to see you here next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.